Is that it might be good if you imagined I was a Connemara woman of uncertain age. Okay? Reckon the first man I ever fell in love with was Manolito. Now, Manolito, he was a character in a TV Western series called the CHAPPARAL. The CHAPPARAL being Big John Cannon's ranch around which most of the action transpired. Big John himself had a brother, Buck, and a son, Blue Boy, who was just a kid more or less. They were a close-knit sort of family and good-hearted with it, seeing as how they all accepted Victoria marrying in after Big John's first wife had passed on. And they even took in Manolito, Victoria's brother, despite him having a bit of a reputation as a gunslinger. It was Manolito I fell in love with, him all dressed in black, with those big brown Spanish eyes burning under the flat brim of his Stetson. You could see it had affected him to gunslinging life. All this I'm telling you about happened back in 68 or 69 at the latter end of those bad mean years in Ireland as people sees them now. Can't say I saw them as such myself at the time. I'd hunker down in my big old armchair Monday nights for my date with Manolito. Ma upstairs hollering for a cup of tea and a banging on the ceiling and such. I'd ignore her, needless to say, until the show was over. Ma was poorly those times and mostly in bed. My brothers and sisters had all pretty much taken off or gotten married, so it fell to me to look after Ma on my own. Guess you could say we weren't a close sort of a family. So anyway, there I was alone with Ma in our own homestead, which was quite a ways out of town, me 19 going on 12 and a half, falling in love with Manolito on the TV. None of which goes to explain the priest killer and notorious outlaw I was later to become, the actual subject of this story. For that, I need to introduce you to the second man I fell in love with, Father Tom Howler. Now, Father Tom was a young curate who arrived into our town around that time packing a whole new set of ideas and new ways of looking at things. He even had a guitar. And I can see him now sitting round with us after a folk mass, strumming away, doing Beatles songs just for the hell of it. Thing about Father Tom was he took his parochial duties real serious, and among other things, this meant visiting the sick. And who was sicker than my old Ma? So out he'd come Tuesday afternoons, and I'd greet him at the door, and he'd see Ma, and then we'd sit in the kitchen and talk. Reckon I probably had a lot to say, me being stuck with Ma most of the time, but he could sure listen good. We'd finish up, and I'd see him to the door, and he'd give me a hug and tell me I was doing just fine, which was good news to hear, seeing as how Ma was pretty stingy with her compliments, to say the least. So I began to sort of depend on these visits, to look forward to them, and of course, soon the farewell hug became a hello hug, and there was more and more time spent in the kitchen and less with Ma. I suppose you can imagine what happened next. Guess I was a girl in a woman's body, but I did surely fall for that Father Tom, even though he was nothing like Manolito, what with his soft little tummy and his pudgy fingers. I reckon he fell in love with me too. Probably couldn't help himself given what I was serving up to him on Tuesday afternoons. So everything went along just fine for a while until, needless to say, some of the townsfolk got wind of it, what was happening, and decided they had to put an end to it. Yeah, they rousted up a deputation and went to the parish priest. He came out and talked to Ma, and that was it. No more Tuesday visits, no more Father Tom. Ma didn't talk to me much after that, and I guess I got pretty silent myself. Silent and goddamn angry. Because the hell of it was, they didn't send Father Tom away. There he was, every Sunday, up on the altar for early Mass, which was my Mass, and Ma's too, when she could manage it. Or strumming on his old guitar down at the convent chapel, the nuns swooning at his elbows. Just like nothing had happened. It fair broke my heart, him and everyone carrying on like that, and me dying of heartbreak. It was after some months of this suffering that the anger got the better of me, and I concluded, like they did in the Old West, that the town was not big enough for the two of us. That was when I resolved to kill Father Tom. Now, it ain't no easy thing to do the first time around. I had to work damn hard at it. Months I spent turning my feelings for him upside down. Turning all the good things we'd had into bad things. Turning all that love into hate. But eventually, I felt I was ready. It was Thursday evening after devotions that I snuck into the sacristy and I cornered him. He was stood there getting out of his vestments when I let him have it right between the eyes. I just blazed away, didn't give him a chance to get a word out. Then I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving nothing but a dead man behind me, dead for all time. Ma died soon after that. The real death, the one that puts you in the ground. I was pretty damn sad about it. She was a bit of a gunslinger herself, yet despite all the pot shots she'd taken of me down the years, I guess I still kind of loved her. But anyway, that was it for me with that town. All I had there was one dead priest and a real bad reputation. So I left without so much as a backward glance. Now, I reckon things could have gone all right for me after that. The killing of Father Tom might have just been a once-off. I could have chosen to just leave it all behind. Yeah, I could have, but I didn't. I was too angry. I was harboring a grudge. I was looking for trouble. And of course I found it, a married man this time. I won't bore you with the details, only explain that he was my boss and it was my first real job. You've heard the likes 1,000 times before. Suffice it to say, it all ended in blood, me having to call him out and face him down. Yeah, I killed him too after he gone back to his wife and family and out of my life forever. Another dead man. After that, I became a drifter. I was a proper outlaw by this time. I didn't care where I put my head down. And it's funny, it was like my reputation went before me because I seemed to attract a particular sort. They'd seek me out to test themselves against me, to see who was faster on the draw. It was during this period that I got quick and I got mean. I put them all down in the end, some of them good men I suppose, but when it came down to a showdown I was a born killer. Picked up a marriage along the way and a couple of kids. I kind of thought if I'd settled down and anchored myself somewhere things might be different, but I should have known better. It couldn't work. I've been a gunslinger too long by NC. I was too suspicious, too wary of getting jumped. So the first bit of real trouble that comes along, I go for my gun and let loose. It was pretty bad. There was a lot of blood. I suppose I hadn't figured on the kids getting caught in the crossfire, but even if I had done, it wouldn't have made any difference to me. I was always going to shoot first and ask questions later. It was the way I had to come. Anyway, when the dust settled on that one, I was on my own again, only now with 2 walking wounded for children. Still, I carried on. I believed that over every horizon the right man was waiting there for me. Of course, I was getting older at this stage and I had to walk and wounded in tow, which sort of cramps your style. Sure, yeah, I got into a couple of more tangos, but the world was moving on. I couldn't. Gunslingers like me were getting beyond our time, products of a world that was fast disappearing. More to be pitied than admired or feared. And it's funny now sometimes listening to the radio or watching TV, I find it's like they want to declare some sort of a general amnesty for the likes of me. It's like they're suggesting it was society that turned me wrong, that it was Father Tom, the townsfolk and the church that made me what I was. Now, it sure is generous of those folk who want to do that, but I don't buy into it myself. I did what I did out of my own responsibility. I reckon you can deny people a lot of things, but you can't deny them a sense of their own responsibility. Guess you could say I'd rather remain unforgiven. So, you're probably wondering how it all turned out for me, Josie Rowan, priest killer, outlaw and gunslinger. Well, the truth of it is pretty simple. I ended up alone, which is pretty goddamn ironic, it being the one thing I figured could just never happen. But ain't that how it goes? Sure, I got my kids, but they don't come too close no more. Can't say I blame them, given the number of times I've drawn my aim at them down through the years. Which sounds kind of familiar, don't it? Guess I understand now a damn sight better than now than I did when I was a kid. Thing I didn't really explain about Ma was how she ended up so damn trigger happy herself. Ain't no mysterious thing, Pa was a drinking man. As awkward a cuss as ever walked on 2 legs apparently, but leastways he had the decency to die young. What I had to deal with was my Ma, who he turned into a regular goddamn bushwhacker. That was the only inheritance he left me. Well, that and perhaps one other thing. See, I got to admit to you that over the years I've developed a certain fondness for the liquor too. And in my decline, I do have a tendency to overindulge. Mostly I start in the afternoons, those lame dog hours that drag themselves so painfully across the face of the day. By sundown, I generally don't feel too much of anything, which suits me just fine. But sometimes, before I'm too far gone, I gets to daydreaming. A little maudlin, if you like. And now, I ain't looking for sympathy here, because it's been said, and it may well be true, that I'm the meanest son of a bitch of a woman that ever walked west of the Shannon. But sometimes I gets to thinking of old Manolito and that little girl who fell in love with him all those years ago, and I think, wouldn't it be just nice if they could take me in there with them too? Wouldn't it be nice if there was a room for me at the High Chaparral?